journalist. And I'm doing all the year, not just in the festival. So, okay, it's my job. But I always want to have the script because I'm sorry about it. It's okay? Of course.
Καλησπέρα. Καλώς ήρθατε. Σας καλωσορίζουμε σε μια πολύ ξεχωριστή συζήτηση, για μένα τουλάχιστον. Έχουμε τη μεγάλη χαρά, τη μεγάλη τιμή να βρίσκεται μαζί μας εδώ στη σκηνή ένας από τους πιο βαθιά ανθρώπινους συγγραφείς σε όλο τον κόσμο. Κυρίες και κύριοι, σήμερα ήρθαμε να ανακαλύψουμε πού βρίσκεται η ευτυχία. Και αν θα έπρεπε να περιγράψω το έργο του Νάιαλ Williams με λίγες λέξεις, θα έλεγα ότι είναι ένα πολύ ισχυρό αντίδοτο στον κινησμό της εποχής μας. Μέσα από τα βιβλία του, που αγαπήθηκαν ιδιαίτερα στην Ελλάδα από τις εκδόσεις Δώμα, τα 4 ερωτικά γράμματα, την ώρα του βρέφους και βέβαια το αυτό είναι ευτυχία, ο Νάιαλ Oυίλλιαμς μας μεταφέρει σε έναν κόσμο που ο χρόνος κυλάει αλλιώς. Στο μικρό βροχερό χωριό Φάχα της Ιρλανδικής υπαίθρου, εκεί που οι άνθρωποι κοιτάζουν ακόμα ο ένας τον άλλον στα μάτια, που η απώλεια συναντά την ελπίδα και που η ευτυχία κρύβεται στις πιο μικρές καθημερινές λεπτομέρειες. Κύριε Williams, σας καλωσορίζουμε στην Ελλάδα, σας καλωσορίζουμε στην Κρήτη, στα Χανιά. Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι που είστε ανάμεσά μας.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say at the start to thank the festival for bringing me here. It is an honor and for me to be in this origin place of story. And I'm deeply grateful to be here. To talk about the world that I've created in Fahá, I think the simplest thing to do is to just read the first page of the novel This is Happiness. This is Happiness. Chapter 1. It had stopped raining. Chapter 2. Nobody in Fahá could remember when it started. Rain there on the western seaboard was a condition of living. It came straight down and sideways, frontwards, backwards, and any other words God could think of. It came in sweeps, in waves, sometimes in veils. It came dressed as drizzle, as mizzle, as mist, as showers, frequent and widespread, as a wet fog, as a damp day, a drop, a dreeping, and an out downpour. It came the fine day, the bright day, and the day promised dry. It came at any time of the day and night and in all seasons, regardless of calendar and forecast, until in Fahá your clothes were rain and your skin was rain and your house was rain with a fireplace. It came off the grey vastness of an Atlantic that threw itself against the land like a lover, once spurned and resolved not to be so again. It came accompanied by seagulls and smells of salt and seaweed. It came with cold air and curtained light. It came like a judgment, or in a benign version, like a blessing God had forgotten he had left on. It came for a handkerchief of blue sky, came on westerlies, sometimes, why not, on easterlies. Came in clouds that broke their backs on the mountains in Kerry and fell into Clare, making mud the ground and blind the air. It came disguised as hail, as sleet, but never as snow. It came softly sometimes, tenderly sometimes. Sometimes its spears turned to kisses, in rain that pretended it was not rain, that had come down to be closer to the fields whose green it loved and fostered, until it drowned them, all of which to attest to one truth. In Fahá, it rained.
Κανείς στη Φάχα δεν θυμόταν πότε είχε αρχίσει. Εκεί, στη δυτική ακτή, η βροχή ήταν συνθήκη της ζωής. Έπεφτε κάθετα και πλάγια, από πίσω, από μπρος και από όπου αλλού σκεφτόταν ο Θεός. Ερχόταν σαρωτική, σε κύματα, καμιά φορά ανάλαφρη, σαν πέπλο. Ερχόταν με φορεσιά ψηλόβροχου, ψυχάλας. Ερχόταν σαν αχνάδα, σαν μπόρα, βαριά και επαναλαμβανόμενη, σαν υγρή αχλή, σαν νοτισμένο πρωινό, σαν σταγόνα, σαν στάλαγμα, σαν κανονική νεροποντή. Ερχόταν τις ωραίες μέρες, τις ηλιόλουστες μέρες, τις μέρες που προμηνύονταν στεγνές. Ερχόταν οποιαδήποτε ώρα της μέρας και της νύχτας και κάθε εποχή, χωρίς να δίνει σημασία σε ημερολόγια και δελτία καιρού, ώσπου στη Φάχα τα ρούχα σου ήταν βροχή και το πετσί σου ήταν βροχή και το σπίτι σου ήταν βροχή με τζάκι. Ερχόταν μέσα από την γκρίζα περαντοσύνη ενός Ατλαντικού που ριχνόταν στη στεριά σαν εραστής, πληγωμένος από την απόρριψη και αποφασισμένος να μην τον απορρίψουν ποτέ ξανά. Ερχόταν συντροφιά με τους γλάρους και με μυρωδιές από φύκια και αλμύρα. Ερχόταν με αέρα ψυχρό και με άψυχο φως. Ερχόταν σαν τη Θεία Δίκη ή, στην αγαθή εκδοχή, σαν ευλογία που ο Θεός ξέχασε να ανακαλέσει. Ερχόταν και άρπαζε ένα μαντίλι γαλανού ουρανού πάνω στον απλιώτη από την Ανατολή ή κάμια φορά, γιατί όχι, και πάνω στο ζέφυρο από τη Δύση. Ερχόταν μέσα στα σύννεφα που τσακίζονταν πάνω στα όρη του Κέρι και έπεφτε στο Κλέρ, κάνοντας λάσπη τη γη, σκοτάδι τον αέρα. Ερχόταν μασκαρεμένη σαν χαλάζι, σαν χιονόνερο, αλλά ποτέ σαν χιόνι. Ερχόταν με το μαλακό καμιά φορά, ερχόταν τρυφερά, τα βέλη της γινόνταν φιλιά, ερχόταν σαν βροχή που καμονόταν, πως δεν ήταν βροχή, που έπεφτε μόνο και μόνο για να σμίξει με τους πράσινους λιμώνες που αγαπούσε και έθρεφε μέχρι να τους πνίξει. Και όλα αυτά προς επίρρωση της μίας και μοναδικής αλήθειας. Στη Φάχα έβρεχε. Θέλαμε να σας διαβάσουμε αυτήν την καταπληκτική μετάφραση πάνω απ' όλα. Και εδώ θα μου επιτρέψετε να κάνω μια ξεχωριστή αναφορά στη μετάφραση της Κίκας Κραμβουσάνου, που είναι εκπληκτική και μας επιτρέπει να έχουμε αυτόν τον λόγο, τον υπέροχο λόγο του Νάιαλ Oυίλλιαμς στα ελληνικά.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to hear it read in Greek. It's just marvelous. It is transporting from this place of blue to my place of green, and in the language and listening to it, and it's wonderful. Thank you.
Κύριε Williams, διαβάζοντας, δεν ήταν αυτή η πρώτη ερώτησή μου, αλλά διαβάζοντας αυτό το κείμενο και ακούγοντας και εσάς, αυτό που ένιωσα μέσα μου ήταν μουσική, ήταν ρυθμός. Πόσο πολύ σας ενδιαφέρει αυτό. Και σε σχέση με τις λέξεις.
So I am an Irish writer, and I believe that I am trying to follow an Irish storytelling tradition. And the Irish storytelling tradition is a tradition in which the point of the story is not to get to the end of the story. The point of the story is to pass the evening telling the story. And so the language becomes a kind of spell into which the reader must enter to enter the world of it. So for me, the writing is about the music of the words, the sentence, the cadence, and I am, first of all, telling the story to myself. So I am sounding each sentence as I say it out loud, and I am feeling what the next sentence is from the sentence before, in the same way as any kind of composition, I think, of music. So because I still believe in that idea of language as spell and story as a kind of spell, I have to keep the reader in the armchair, and the reader comes into the armchair inside the music of the voice.
Η γενική θεματική του φεστιβάλ μας είναι κόσμοι σε σύγκρουση. Και θυμάμαι όταν είχαμε για πρώτη φορά αλληλογραφήσει, μου είχατε πει, μα εδώ στη Φάχα όλα είναι ήρεμα, γιατί να μιλήσω εγώ για τη σύγκρουση. Στο βιβλίο σας, αυτό είναι ευτυχία, το βιβλίο που κρατάμε στα χέρια μας τώρα, η μεγάλη σύγκρουση δεν γίνεται βέβαια με όπλα, αλλά με την έλευση του ηλεκτρισμού. Είναι η σύγκρουση ανάμεσα σε έναν κόσμο παλιό, σε έναν κόσμο χειροποίητο, παραδοσιακό κόσμο, που τον ξέρουμε και εμείς εδώ στην Ελλάδα, που χάνεται με ένα μοντέρνο τεχνολογικό κόσμο που έρχεται με απίστευτη ορμή. Πιστεύετε ότι αυτή η σύγκρουση ανάμεσα στο παρελθόν και την πρόοδο είναι απαραίτητο πάντα να αφήνει πίσω της θύματα?
I think when I think of the idea of worlds in conflict, I think I know very little about the world. I think small. I know a little bit about my community and where I have lived with Christine, who is here somewhere for the last 40 years. And I also think of the thing that William Faulkner said in his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize of Literature. He said the only true subject is the human heart in conflict with itself. And that's sort of my subject. That's what I feel. So I'm essentially trying to write about love and conflicts in relation to that. The other thing, so in This Is Happiness, it is a novel which on the surface seems to be about the coming of electricity in the summer of 1958 to a village in County Clare on the west coast of Ireland. And that's what it seems to be about. But while it is also about that, it is actually about the time in your life when you yourself became electric. That is to say, when you experienced the polarities of life, love and death, which the central character experiences. And so his conflict is with himself, first of all, in relation to that. And the belief, can you believe in love? That idea. And I think that as a general principle, I always think small. So I am writing about a community called Fahá in the west of Ireland, and I feel that there is enough story, enough humanity in a small village to take me the rest of my days to write about. And their conflicts are on the large scale, yes, with change in the big scale, but actually in day-to-day life, people's conflicts are with their family members, the person they love, or so on, their neighbor, and so on, in really small microcosm. In the belief that the Irish poet Patrick Kavanagh, who would be when we were at school, he was considered the second most important poet to Yeats. So we read Patrick Kavanagh when we were 15 in school. And he said it would take a lifetime to know a single field. And so that's a sort of guiding principle for me, in the sense of Fahá, is my mini world.
Θα μου επιτρέψετε να βγαίνουμε και να μπαίνουμε στην ευτυχία, ακολουθώντας παράλληλα και κάποιους σταθμούς στη ζωή σας. Το 1985, αν δεν κάνω λάθος, εσείς και η σύζυγός σας, η Κριστίν, η οποία είναι επίσης συγγραφέας και μαζί είχατε γράψει και νομίζω και τα πρώτα 4 βιβλία, πήρατε μια πολύ ριζοσπαστική απόφαση να αφήσετε τη Νέα Υόρκη, τους πολύ έντονους ρυθμούς και να ζήσετε σε ένα απομονωμένο μέρος, ένα παλιό εξοχικό σπίτι στο Κλέρ. Και αναρωτιέμαι αν γυρίζατε το χρόνο πίσω, τι θα λέγατε σε εκείνον το νεαρό Νάιαλ που ξεκίνησε έτσι, που πήρε αυτή τη μεγάλη απόφαση.
So I grew up in Dublin and met Christine in Dublin when she came from America to study Irish literature. And I was Irish studying American literature. So we met over books, and like most, I would say, Irish people of my generation and my age at the time, I felt there was nothing for me in Ireland, that Ireland was not interesting. And I wanted to go to America, which seemed full of possibility, exciting literature. I had studied William Faulkner in my master's degree, so I wanted to go to America. And so we went to America, we got married. But after maybe 4.5 years there, we felt we were not living our own life. We were riding a commuter train into Manhattan every day for an hour in the morning and coming home in the evening. When we went in the morning, the people were beautiful, perfect suits, perfume, high heels, everything was so beautiful on the train platform going in. And when we saw those same people in the evening, at 6, 7 o'clock coming home on the train, the men's ties were pulled to one side, their heads were nodding on the train, and it seemed as if their lives were sort of laid out on those commuter tracks. So we felt that if we fell asleep on the train, we could wake up 5 years later and still be riding that train into an office in Manhattan. And we would never answer the question, we'd never be able to answer the question, do you have any talent? Could you write a book? Because the answer would always be, I never had the time. And maybe at 65, you might find the time, retire, and say, okay, I must write one now. So we took that leap. It has been described as a leap of faith, but actually it's a leap of doubt and daring. You kind of leap blindly. They say that faith is blind, and so we didn't know that it would work out. But what's the worst that could happen, Chris would say? We might have to go back. That's the worst that could happen. And Chris has a saying, increasingly as we have gotten older, when I get anxious or worried about will this work or will that work, she says, well, what if it all worked out? Maybe it'll all work out. And so our sense generally is from that moment of getting off the commuter train and moving to a 300-year-old stone cottage of 4 rooms, not 4 bedrooms, 4 rooms in County Clare, that it sort of has worked out by the simple fact of dreaming it into reality. So between us, the two of us, we have written 20 books, plays, or screenplay in that time of the 40 years there. And we have raised 2 children there, and we have made, more important than anything perhaps, we have made a garden and tried to improve the piece of soil that we are temporarily the caretaker of, just in front of the house, to make something beautiful in your life. So that's what that life is.
Πάνω απ' όλα όμως αυτό που σας συνδέει ένας μεγάλος έρωτας και στα βιβλία σας, η αγάπη έχει αυτή ακριβώς τη δύναμη. Θυμάμαι όταν είχα πρωτοδιαβάσει τα 4 ερωτικά γράμματα. Είχα συγκλονιστεί. Άλλοι πιστεύουν ότι σε κοινικούς καιρούς είναι ανόητο ίσως να μιλάμε για αυτά τα συναισθήματα.
Yes. So it's also dangerous to call a book 4 letters of love. But we had together once we moved to County Clare in 1985, between 1985 and 1995, 10 years, we wrote 4 books together about our life in County Clare, non-fiction books about the community and the experience of the place. And every day there was an education. And we were living among older people, and they wanted to make us a success in the community. So they taught us how to live in this location, in this place. And eventually I knew that I hadn't come from New York to west of Ireland in order not to write a novel. I wanted to write a novel. I had published a first short story when I was 18 in the national newspaper. So I felt I might get one chance to write one novel, and into it I need to put everything that I feel. And the biggest thing that I felt, obviously, was my love for Chris and how the shape of my life had come out of that love, and that I had followed it and it had brought us to there. So believing that I would only get to write one novel, I tried in that novel to put father-daughter love, father-son love, brother-sister love, etc. Love of land, love of music, love of place, etc. And poetry and art. And so it was written out of an intensity of feeling that maybe there would only be one shot, one chance.
Να πω ότι έγινε και μια πολύ ωραία ταινία. Σας άρεσε η μεταφορά? Τι νιώσατε όταν πρωτοείδατε τους ήρωές σας στον κινηματογράφο? Ήταν οι δικοί σας ήρωες ή ήταν οι ήρωες του σκηνοθέτη?
So first I would say I am really glad that I am a novelist. It seems to me that if you ever see a film that's perfect, it's a miracle, and you should stand up and say hallelujah, because there are so many opportunities for a film to go wrong. Many, many, many more than there are for a novel. So the answer to this question would take 27 years. Because that's the amount of time it was between the book being written and the film appearing on the screen. And in all of those 27 years, somebody was always making the film. Different directors, different actors, so much so that when I met Helena Bonham Carter on the beach in Donegal, she told me that 27 years earlier, she had hoped to play the daughter. Now she was playing the mother. And so all of those different versions of the film you've imagined at different times. So in the end, there are things in the film that are really beautiful, and I'm very proud of them. But I am very aware of the things that, how decisions in film get made, and that it's called a film business. And business is an important part of that.
Θα γυρίσω και πάλι στο «Αυτό είναι ευτυχία». Νομίζω τώρα επεξεργάζεστε και ένα σενάριο για αυτό το βιβλίο, αλλά πηγαίνοντας στην ιστορία του, θα ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω καταρχήν πόσο ταυτίζεστε με τον ήρωά σας. Είναι γεννημένος την ίδια χρονολογία που είστε κι εσείς. Έτσι δεν είναι? Το 1958. Και θα ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω, γυρνάει πίσω στην εποχή που ήταν 17 ετών, στη Φάχα, που αναγκάστηκε να πάει εκεί από κάποιες ιδιαίτερες οικογενειακές συνθήκες και γίνεται, αποκτά μια πολύ στενή σχέση πάλι με ένα μεγαλύτερο άνδρα. Ο ήρωάς σας είναι ο Νόου, ο μεγαλύτερος άνδρας είναι ο Κρίστη και έχουν μια πολύ ιδιαίτερη σχέση. Ποια κομμάτια από εσάς, λοιπόν, έχει ο Κρίστη, ποια κομμάτια από εσάς έχει ο Νόου και ποια κομμάτια από εσάς έχει βεβαίως ο 78χρονος άνδρας που θυμάται το παρελθόν.
So I think the most truthful thing to say is that, first of all, I base no characters on myself, because it seems to me that that would be to do an injustice to the other one, to this person. Iris Murdoch said in an essay called The Sublime and the Beautiful that the art of fiction is the art of other persons, and that we judge great novelists by their ability to be in the skin of the other. And so it seems to me that to honor the uniqueness of each individual, none of them should be me. But yet, I am all of them in some way. So I have felt I am Christy, I am No, I am certainly Ganga, the grandfather, as I am also Dodie, the grandmother, and so on and so forth. I might even also be Harry the dog. So this sense of the novelist each time trying to inhabit the skin of this person is, for me, the idea that Joseph Conrad said when he said the goal of the fiction writer is to do the highest possible justice to the world. And to do justice to the uniqueness of another individual is, I see it as my job. To do justice to them, not to make them versions of me, not to make them clones of me or anything like that, but to give them their own individuality, skin, way of speaking, and mannerisms, etc. So the characters are not me, but they have elements of my spirit, obviously, in them.
Θα μείνω λίγο στη σχέση του νεότερου με τον μεγαλύτερο άντρα. Πιστεύετε ότι η νεότητα και η ωριμότητα έχουν ανάγκη μία την άλλη για να καταλάβουν τι σημαίνει ευτυχία?
So I do feel that the relationship between Christy and No is a relationship of opposites at the start that find a common ground. As I have said before, our experience when we first moved to County Clare, to a small community, was an experience of living among older people. And this is a world where in the evening you went out your door and you walked down the road when you did not need an invitation. You just went in the back door, you didn't knock, you just went in and you passed the evening and you had conversation with people, and you realized very quickly that what you brought with you was your story. What happened to you today, and tell me some story about you at whatever, that. And they in turn told me, and Christine's stories as well. And so that relationship right from the start in County Clare was a relationship of older and younger people. And although at first we were polar opposites, Christine and I, coming from literature, coming recently from New York, into a world where there were, very small 2 television channels, people still going to church all the time, and that world is still there, where the telephone in your house was a telephone with a winder, to no rotary, to call into the village post office, that world. So we were from the first in an older world. And I began to appreciate essentially wisdom. The wisdom of people who have experienced life. In the same way that every old person, older, I'm now old person or older, was once young. So they know what that was like. Much as every young person was never yet old. So it's a very interesting dynamic to me. In the creation, honestly, in the creation of Christy and No, I now can see that I was probably influenced by reading Zorba the Greek, which I had read at the time, which has a relationship between a bookish person and a full-of-life character. And so some sense of that embracing of life that is in Christy is a sort of Irish version, maybe, of Zorba, was certainly influenced by the dynamic between the two of them. And when I spoke to the person who is to direct the film, he said, what film should I look at? And I said, not Irish films first. The first film to look at is Zorba the Greek. Start looking at that first to think about how the dynamic works in that relationship. So, in the first scene of that film, when we see the boat come in, as I recall, and he has his books with him and he gets off on, that. So just moments of that relationship. So that's my sense of it. I'm trying, this is a terrible thing to say perhaps, but in some way I'm trying to honor the people that I'm writing about. A thing that happened to me while writing This Is Happiness, which hadn't happened before, was about 2/3 of the way through the book, I realized that I did not want to finish it. I wanted to just stay there. I wanted to keep writing. I could write for the rest of my life, This Is Happiness, and that would be okay, right? So it's quite hard to finish it.
Και εμείς θα θέλαμε να συνεχίσετε να το γράφετε.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do a version of that now by, I realized the only way I could let go of This Is Happiness was to understand that I would continue to stay in Fahá for the rest of my writing days, and that I would write a series of novels covering the time between the coming of electricity in 1958 and the coming of the internet. So the second half of the 20th century in one village. In the same thing that I have said before, where I don't believe there's any such thing as a minor character, in the same way I don't believe there's any such thing as a minor person. So therefore, a character who may only have 2 lines in one novel could in another novel have a whole novel to himself or herself. That way. So gradually build that world and stay in it. So I am going to stay in that novel, in that world. I'm going to trace what happens to church, community, everything in that society over that period of time. But honestly, my sense is Christine and I have been living there, as I said, 40 years. And people are still the same. People are people. And despite the fact that they might now have mobile phones where once they had wind-up telephones, despite the fact that now they have coffee shops where once they only drank tea and coffee was only for the special visitor and only a spoon of Nescafe in a cup for the special visitor, despite those surface changes, the actual people themselves, in my experience, are still the same.
Τώρα, όταν οι αναγνώστες παίρνουν το βιβλίο σας, διαβάζουν στο εξώφυλλο, αυτό είναι ευτυχία. Αλλά όταν ανοίγουν τις σελίδες του βιβλίου, ζουν σε ένα βροχερό, φτωχικό χωριό, αντιμετωπίζοντας απώλειες, πολλές δυσκολίες. Τελικά, η ευτυχία για σας, μήπως δεν είναι η απουσία των προβλημάτων, αλλά η ικανότητά μας να είμαστε παρόντες στη στιγμή ακόμη και όταν βρέχει.
No, it's not the absence of problems. We all have problems. Everyone sitting here has some ailment, some issue, some anxiety, all of us all the time. Christie's idea in This Is Happiness is essentially that even knowing pain and suffering and loss, knowing all of those things, the fact that you are still breathing, smelling, meeting people, the fact that you are still under a sky is actually happiness, because it's still every moment full of possibility. What if it all worked out, Chris says. So that sense is still there at every moment. Maybe things will get better. What if they did? Is still always there. So this is Christie's sense, and that doesn't deny, for me anyway, it doesn't deny the actuality of suffering, hardship, difficulty, conflict, etc. Before we came out this evening, I saw the terrible earthquakes in Venezuela, just like that. And it's just appalling and saddening and tragic and so on. And so it's not to turn a blind eye to things and say everything is going to be wonderful or anything like that. Everything is not going to be wonderful, I think, is Christie's point of view, but still you are alive. And that is something. And so that is the sense he has in the novel, I think, is the version of happiness that the novel is anyway dealing with.
Και μιλώντας γενικότερα για την λογοτεχνία, θα ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω, επειδή μέσα στο βιβλίο σας πιστεύετε, ζούμε σε την έλευση του ηλεκτρισμού το 1958, σήμερα ζούμε την έλευση της ψηφιακής υπερπληροφόρησης, μόλις είπατε πριν ότι διαβάσατε για τον μεγάλο σεισμό, και βέβαια της τεχνητής νοημοσύνης, άλλο μεγάλο κεφάλαιο αυτό. Και θέλω να σας ρωτήσω αν πιστεύετε ότι αυτή η πρόοδος μας στέρισε τελικά την ικανότητα να βιώνουμε εκείνη την αργή, την χειροποίητη ευτυχία, θα έλεγα, που περιγράφεται μέσα στο βιβλίο σας.
I don't think it takes away the possibility of it, but I think it certainly does provide the possibility of not experiencing it. So I think you have to make a more active choice. So the more and more possibilities and things that are offered to you through the internet, your phone, and so on and so forth, the more it is put upon you to make your own life choices as to how you want to live. And in some way, this has always been the case. How do you want to live? But now the choices are more thrown at you, commercial choices and so on, in my sense. I'm very glad that we live in a remote place on the far side of Ireland, near the Atlantic Ocean, and not in a city, for example, where the choices would be more difficult to make. So where we live, there are certainly days when the two of us, the only people we see are each other. But we are in the garden every afternoon if we can be, just quietly working in the garden, no machines or other things coming at us. We are trying to make the garden. And so, but this is a choice. And it's a choice which for some people would be an impoverishing choice because we are losing out or missing out on what's other things that are available. If we want to go to the theatre, we have to make a choice to say, okay, we are going in a car or a cinema, to going in a car, planning it and heading off for it like an expedition, that sense. But I find that enriching, not impoverishing. It is enriching to be given those choices in the place we are. And I feel the older I have lived and the more I have lived there in that place, the more grateful I am for the simplicity of that life and what that simplicity has given me. It also, in terms of writing, for a writer, it removes me from any sense of competition or the big world of books or publishing or what's happening or those kind of things. And it instead puts me in this sort of narrow focus of that I can only do what I can do. And it doesn't matter what anybody else does in that place. So I have found it enriching. But I understand the question, absolutely, at the difficulties.
Ξέρουμε καλά πλέον ότι είστε μανιώδης Κυπουρός. Και αναρωτιέμαι ότι φροντίζετε το χώμα και τα φυτά σας. Αναρωτιέμαι αν η γραφή σας μοιάζει και με την κυπουρική. Πώς δουλεύετε, πώς φυτεύετε τις λέξεις, πώς τις ποτίζετε και πώς τις περιποιείστε ώστε να ανθίσουν στο χαρτί.
So I need to say, first of all, Christine is the real gardener. She is the artist of the gardener, and I am the one with the wheelbarrow and the bucket and digging the hole. And Niall, will you move this? I am that person, first of all. So Christine is the one who can have a palette in the garden and see this color will go with this and this plant here, and she is doing that. So she has a wonderful painter, artist aesthetic, and so is very aware of physical beauty and plant more than I am. So I am an apprentice, maybe, gardener. So when we go into the garden, as example, maybe it's a male thing, I don't know. I like to know what job I am going to do and then do that job. But Christine will not ever say what she's going to do in the garden. She goes, does a bit of this, or sees a bit of that, moves this, bit over here. So this, in a way, is more like an artist responding to a white canvas and responding to what is on the canvas. So when I am writing, I have no plan, no plot. I have no idea what the book is about. I am only trying to respond to the sentence here and what is the next sentence that goes with that one. And the story, I believe, is already there. I just have to have a sentence and then the next one and the next one, little by little teasing the sentence out of the silence in the idea that it's kind of waiting there for me. So in a way, I'm doing the gardening, same thing as she's doing. I'm responding to it as I see it emerge. But really, when I'm writing the book for myself. I'm writing it because it's the book that I want to read, and I want to see what happens. And once the book is finished, I have no vanity or attachment to it, because I have been through it and come out the other side. And then it's in the world. It's for anyone else who wants to have the experience of going into it and coming out. I am finished with it, and I am much more interested in the most exciting thing in the world is find one more good sentence and then see where that one goes. So I am already leaving the scene of that.
Οι περισσότεροι συγγραφείς, θα έλεγα, επιλέγουν να γράφουν για το σκοτάδι, για τη βία ή και πολλές φορές και για τον κινησμό των ανθρώπινων σχέσεων. Εσείς επιμένετε να αναζητάτε την καλοσύνη, τη συγχώρεση, τη λύτρωση στα βιβλία σας. Θεωρείτε ότι αν θα μπορούσαμε να μιλήσουμε για μια λογοτεχνία της καλοσύνης σαν μια μορφή επανάσταση ή αντίσταση, θα έλεγα, στη σημερινή σκληρή πραγματικότητα?
Yes, I think, so in my translation it comes as the word insist on. So I don't insist on goodness, but it happens. I am aware, of course, when writing This is Happiness, that the most dangerous thing to do in the world today was to write about happiness. And I wrote a piece, opinion piece for the New York Times, aware of the difficulty of this subject in the world that we are in. And so I am aware of it. Myself, I would feel it would be easier, certainly, to write about darkness. But that most people's experience of life is not that, in my view. Even though there are many, many more films, and particularly films, let's say, and television shows about serial killers. There are more television shows about serial killers than there are serial killers. And so this sense of evil as an easy subject, and let's go for that, is a sort of easy target in a way. But my experience is, as a human being, is that I have never personally experienced evil. So if I was to write it, I would be kind of inventing it based upon hearsay. But I have experienced human dignity, goodness, generosity, kindness, understanding, compassion, love. These things I have experienced. I know them. I know them to be true. And so why not write about those? Even though I'm aware of the difficulty and the danger of it becoming sentimental and the accusations of nostalgia or so on and so forth. So I still need to do it. I'm at a stage in my life when I need to say, you know, it doesn't matter. I have to do what I have to do. There's a line in a W.B. Yeats poem, which is later in his life he wrote, "Song, let them take it. There's more enterprise in walking naked." And that idea that in the end, as an old man or older man, you have to say, to hell with it, I'm just going to be naked, and just go for it. Go for the heart, and not be afraid of what will they think of this, or what will the newspapers say, or the critics say, or so on and so forth. To hell with that, and let's just go for it. So that's my sense now of where I am in my life now.
Αλλά σήμερα η Ιρλανδία, παρά την οικονομική της άνθηση, αντιμετωπίζει πάρα πολύ μεγάλες κοινωνικές κρίσεις και αναρωτιέμαι πώς τα βλέπετε όλα αυτά, ιδιαίτερα το πρόβλημα το στεγαστικό για τους νέους ανθρώπους. Θυμάμαι ότι μιλώντας με τον Πολ Ίντς, μου έλεγε ότι έβλεπε ανθρώπους της μεσαίας τάξης πια να είναι άστεγοι και βέβαια και άλλα πολλά προβλήματα που υπάρχουν, και μπορεί η σύγχρονη Ιρλανδία να έχει κάνει και τεράστια βήματα πια, αλλά πώς βλέπετε αυτήν την κοινωνική κατάσταση, την πολιτική και κοινωνική κατάσταση στη χώρα σας σήμερα? Δεν σας εξοργίζει, δεν σας βγάζει μερικές φορές έξω από τη φάχα?
So, first of all, I am not a social commentator. I live in the world I live in, and of course I am aware of the outside world. So yes, so I'm always slow to speak about Ireland. In a way, I don't live in Ireland, which is a sort of large abstract idea, but I live in a community here, and that's what I know about. So I feel safe talking about that as opposed to the world or a country. But that said, it is certainly true that Ireland has faced a housing crisis, same as many other places. And the factors that have caused this are transparent. So the population has greatly increased since Brexit and since the pandemic. And so the population has increased, the country has prospered. The multinational tech companies have come to headquarters in Dublin. And so suddenly the country is more wealthy than it ever was before. Population is bigger. And I think that Ireland wants to build 30,000 homes a year. And during the 2, if not 3 years of the pandemic, they built 0. So we are behind by about 100,000 homes to what we need, even if we keep going at 30,000 a year now. This is the facts, as I understand them. So there is a housing problem, particularly in Dublin. The country is lopsided by the fact that everything is centred in Dublin, and the west of Ireland is a completely different situation. So our son, actually, Joseph, is just returned from New York, like many others, to live in Ireland, who came back. And he is a law graduate, and he has just done a proposal to Trinity College in Dublin to do a PhD about the housing crisis. So I think the young people are very aware of it and want to make change happen. At the same time as the change can't possibly happen fast enough, because as I just said, there are 100,000 homes behind where they need to be. Largely, I think, because of the pandemic, combined with the increase in population. So those are realities. When I sit down to write a novel, those are not the realities that I am going to write about, because those are not in Fahá in 1962. I am in 1962 in my imagination. While in my actual life, yes, I am aware of what happens, and I encourage my son, yes, the young people have to solve this problem. And they will solve the problem, is what I believe. They will solve it, because they are so aware of it. And I believe in human beings, human beings' ability to solve social problems. I believe that. So I believe that will happen, and I will encourage my son and other young people, yes, this is the problem, and yes, we must solve it.
Μου δίνετε μια εξαιρετική ευκαιρία να σας ρωτήσω εάν πιστεύετε ότι ακόμα η λογοτεχνία μπορεί να είναι το καταφύγιό μας, ώστε να μπορούμε να αποδράσουμε από αυτούς τους σκληρούς και κοινικούς καιρούς που ζούμε.
So I have a different idea about that. I never ever feel that literature is an escape. I think that's too easy a thing to say. I feel instead that literature is an enriching. So I am not escaping when I read a book, a novel particularly. I am enriching my own sense of other people, the world, humanity, which in turn is putting me more into life, not taking me out. I'm not escaping from life into a book. So when I read Dickens, and I read in Dickens, let's say, in David Copperfield, and we meet Mr. Micawber, and Dickens uses the adjective varnished for Mr. Micawber's face, because Mr. Micawber is always looking on the bright side. Even though he's penniless and things are very bad for him, and he's going to end up going to pauper's prison for poor people, because he doesn't pay any of his bills. The varnished on him, and I read that varnished, and I can see that person, a person who always looks on the bright side, and Dickens treats him like a full human being, I think, as he does many characters. And by my encounter with Mr. Micawber, my sense of human beings is enriched, I think. So I don't feel it's an escape. I feel it's actually the opposite. It's bringing me into life, because I'm being brought in to meet people. I can meet many, many more people in novels than I can in real life. Do you know James Woods, the famous critic from Harvard and the New Yorker? His book of lectures about literature, the title is The Nearest Thing to Life. That in a book we can encounter, in fiction, we can encounter human beings perhaps more profoundly than we can in everyday life, because we can know what's going on in their minds, which we can't in real life. So we can see them, hear them, go with them when they go into private places, and we experience them. So that is an enriching, because for me, the experience of literature is an experience of communion. And communion is not an escape, because later when I meet somebody outside in the street or so on, my own sense of them is enriched by my encountering of people on the page. So this is a kind of holy idea that I have of literature, and I absolutely believe it. This idea of it enriching me. Shakespeare enriches me. Yeats enriches me. Heaney, Seamus Heaney enriches me. Zorba enriched me when I read it. I had a bigger sense of human beings' possibilities. And so therefore it's not an escape but an enrichment.
Θα μπορούσαμε να μιλάμε για πολλές ώρες, νομίζω. Πραγματικά είστε ένα αντίδοτο για την κοινικότητα των καιρών μας, μέχρι να προετοιμαστεί το κοινό για κάποιες ερωτήσεις. Εγώ θα ήθελα να σας κάνω την πολύ απλή και πολύ περίπλοκη ερώτηση, κύριε Williams. Τι είναι ευτυχία?
What is happiness? So happiness is being here, breathing, being alive, meeting people. How extraordinary it is to have a book festival here in this magnificent harbour, and that people will come to listen to somebody from Ireland speak about a book that's about a little village in the west of Ireland, to which you have not been except through the pages of a book, and how enlarging and enriching that is, that idea. I think, anyway, for me, happiness is... So a book festival is a kind of avowal, you know, of fate, that books still matter. I have to say, so my books I've translated into many languages, but the edition of Doma books, Christine and I both feel, are by far the most beautiful of all of the translations of any other language edition. Their books are so beautiful. They are so honoring the idea of the book itself. And this is a happiness for a writer. When a writer gets that book in the post, and Tim, the postman, brings it, and he says, here, a book for you from Greece. And he's looked at the stamp, and we've looked at the stamp, and then we open it, and we take it out so carefully, and look at it and put it on the table. It's a sort of marvelous, marvelous thing. And we show our friends who come, so this is from Greece, this is the Greek edition. Oh, it's beautiful. And that little sort of act of faith in the idea that the book itself matters, in turn inspires the writer. In turn wants to make the writer, I want to write a better book, because they're going to make a beautiful one. So that whole cycle of life is such a hopeful thing for me. The idea that there are readers in everywhere, and that they can connect through words on a page into other human beings. And then they tell other people, and so on and so forth, and that kind of hopefulness, positivity that just spreads through, which is for me a kind of expression of love that I feel so honored to be part of. When I began, I know I'm talking too long, I will quickly finish. When I began as a writer, I didn't want ever to be famous or be known. What I wanted was to have a book that could sit on a shelf with other writers. That is still my goal, and has always been the goal, to just get some of your spirit into a book and have it on a shelf. And so I've been doing it for 50 years since my first short story. And in that 50 years, that is still the most exciting thing. And to be here in your company, I feel humbled and honored for that same continuation of that. And long may it continue that you have the festival here and that people come. Even in the sunshine and when you might be swimming or doing something else, people come to hear people talk about books. It's just marvelous. So on my behalf and on Christine's behalf, thank you. Thank you for that.
Φίλοι και φίλες, δεν έχουμε χρόνο για ερωτήσεις, αλλά ο κύριος Williams θα υπογράψει τα βιβλία του ακριβώς εδώ πίσω από την αίθουσα. Κυρίες και κύριοι, αυτό είναι ευτυχία. Να ακούς και να συνομιλείς με τον Νάιαλ Williams. Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.